Hey everyone, thanks for joining today. We're going to give it just a minute as participants come in. So we'll get started in another minute or so, but thank you for joining us today. See some friendly soda faces in here. Hey, Anshay, Jen, Nick, thanks for being here, guys. Sorry we're not on video. I'd love to see your faces. Natalie, do you want to give me just you can just message me, let me know if we're looking good to get started in terms of the waiting room and we'll get rolling. All right. I'm going to get started. So, thank you everyone for joining, and we're gonna get started. First of all, I'm Tom Beck, Executive Director from Soda, and we're hosting the session today. We appreciate you being here. Uh, and for those of you, if you're following the World Cup, if there's anyone here from Argentina or Spain, I hope you're not too hungover from celebrating the last few days. And likewise, if there's anyone here from England or France, I hope you're not too hungover drowning your sorrows in the pubs. So it's been quite an exciting run here in the U.S. for all these matches. Um, but today we're going to be talking about building a growth portfolio for your existing client growth. An area that we all know is very important, but we often overlook as agency leaders, focusing on new revenue from new opportunities and failing to grow existing clients often to the potential of what they could be. And I was joking with Albert and Vanessa the last this last week that we within the soda community we do benchmarking research often, and no matter what the economic climate is like, this holds true for the last 10 years. Whenever I ask questions about the top challenges that agencies are facing, uh, growth, growth, and new business is always one of the top three. This has been true in boom cycles, and it's certainly been true in cycles where we're facing more challenges systemically or from the market. So we're excited to dig into this conversation today. I'm going to let Albert and Vanessa introduce themselves. But before we do that, just a quick housekeeping item. If you have questions throughout the conversation today, please feel free to post them in the chat or in the kind of Q&A window, and we'll monitor along the way and try to either get to them in line, or we'll hold some of them for the end of the conversation. So again, thanks for being here. It's really nice to spend an hour with y'all. And without further ado, we're going to jump in. And Vanessa, I'm going to let you introduce yourself first, but thanks for being with us today.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Tom, and the Soda community for having us to join the webinar today. I'm Vanessa Cartwright. I've spent well over 20 years or so leading a pretty wide variety of digital agencies in different roles: managing director, chief client officer, chief operating officer, CEO, and I've done that in the US, Canada, and the UK. And I've kind of been through that journey of quite a lot of agency acquisitions and as both seller and buyer along the way. And I've done it for holding companies, independent agencies, private equity backed businesses. And now my focus is very much working as advisor and board director, and hopefully bringing some of that experience to support founders of typically independent agencies, strengthen their businesses, whether that's becoming more attractive to potential buyers or investors, or simply making sure that the business performs as well as possible. And my orientation has always been very kind of client focused. It's a real passion of mine, which is why we've got the topic today is, how do we improve performance from our existing clients as much as possible?
Amazing. Thank you. Well, we're thrilled to have you, Vanessa. And Albert, give us the rundown.
Absolutely. Well, again, thanks for having me. I have a sort of a kindred spirit in Vanessa, so I'm thrilled to be doing this with her. So, Albert Banks, 20-year agency veteran. I describe myself as a recovering agency owner. Started out as a developer. Transitioned my firm. First started with MyJive as a web development shop, moved into a digital agency, merged with the local competitor in Union. Ultimately, had an acquisition and exit from a Valtech. So been through a lot of transitions and acquisitions and sales and things like that. Now I run Apertus. It is myself. I'm here to help business owners and founders that can play out as a fractional leader or advisor, again, to typically agencies and those that are independent, and taking my experience with seeing the typical growth plateaus and challenges, integrations, exits, and helping folks hopefully avoid any of the pitfalls that I experienced so they can have a profitable business that's truly excellent at operations, finance, employee engagement, and ready to either buy or sell whenever that time comes.
Amazing. Well, thank you for being with us, Albert. And based on the fact that you are still actively consulting in the agency space, I would say your recovery is not going as well as it could be.
Fair
So
enough.
I know it is like a drug, though. It's hard to get away from. So, well, thank you both, and I think we'll jump right in. And again, to just reorient the crew today, we're going to be talking more specifically about growing your existing client portfolio, less about new lead generation. And so, with that as a starter, and we'll start with you, Vanessa. What are some of the symptoms of why agencies struggle so much with existing account growth? And I just, before you jump into that, I think, in data we've seen within the soda community, and it depends a little bit year over year. These are averages, but, we've often seen that, our member companies' existing client revenue might account from anywhere from, we'll say, 50 to 70%, and often it's more 60 to 70% of that agency's revenue in a given year. And yet growth in general is still often elusive. So you kind of even look at that mathematically and go 70% of our portfolio is sort of existing client revenue, and we just can't seem to grow that. And we're kind of constantly looking at new lead generation or new clients for revenue growth. So what is it that, why are agencies struggle so much with existing account growth?
Yeah, I know it's quite the conundrum because it sounds pretty straightforward, and everyone I think will you'll hear a lot as an agency leader. It should be a lot easier to grow your business from your existing clients, right? They're people that know you, ideally who like you. They know what you do as an agency, so the theory is great that it should be much more straightforward to find new business from them. I think there might be a certain allure to the fun of brand net new business development, but I think it's daunting, and I think it's harder than it sounds. So some of the work I've been doing recently has been nice, actually, moving from the operator role to advisor role, because I can kind of talk to clients and get a slightly more objective perspective from them around what's going on. And what I've heard from some of the agencies I've been working with, and I experienced this as an agency leader as well, is comments such as, we've run out of things to sell to our existing clients. We've already sold them everything that we do. I hear, well, our team just doesn't like feeling really salesy. It makes them uncomfortable. We don't want to put that kind of pressure on our existing clients. And then I hear, well, our clients don't tell us enough about their business. We don't really know what their plans are, what their roadmaps are. So we don't know where to find that growth. But what I have found when I've been in the nice position of being able to actually go and talk to their clients is something quite different, and I think quite revealing, which is things like, we really like, agency X, but we want them to take a higher level of accountability for the outcome of the work that they do. I hear, we really like them, but they're not bringing us proactive solutions. Or I hear, we really like them. They're coming to us with recommendations, but those recommendations just aren't grounded in our business priorities. There's a tremendous receptivity, I think, from clients who have, they have their own numbers to meet, they have their own bonuses to make, their own promotions to get. I think they really are eager to hear from their agency partners, the ones they're already working with, what their kind of best recommendations are, but feel that they're perhaps just not stepping up and coming and sharing those. So
Yeah.
I think that's definitely on the struggle side, what I'm hearing.
I love that. I haven't heard that one. We don't have anything else to sell them. So I never knew in professional services we ran into no more inventory challenge. But now we'll definitely add that one to the list. How about you, Albert? Just in terms of, and you've seen it from both the inside and the outside. Anything to add to kind of Vanessa's perspective there in terms of, what are some of the key sticking points or struggles you've experienced or seen, which is getting a client account growth engine going?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, especially the early days when you're really just trying to grow and you haven't really gotten to scalability, you're relying on the founder, like they're sort of the hero. They're out there stomping the grounds and trying to find work, or you're just maybe more reactive in order taking. We definitely had that at my job, right? We were just trying to make payroll, right? So we're kind of taking everything, and there wasn't a proactivity to it. Later we really ran into this kind of AM PM collision where, if you have somebody sort of playing both roles, they could get bogged down on the current work versus, being proactive with their clients. So you just run into a time constraint, a true issue there with resourcing. And then sort of operational debt, right? As you're growing and scaling, you may not have the tools connected or the data to even know what's going on with an account, much less think about how to grow it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know this will be, this is the other side of the coin or the corollary. So some of them are A is the struggle. Here's what agencies do well that don't have that same struggle. But I think it's helpful to kind of confront it from, from that angle. So Vanessa, maybe you can start with that of what are the ingredients? Like if you're just thinking of putting, again, it's a recipe. If you're just thinking of some of the core ingredients that really make a client growth engine work and be sustainable, what are some of those factors that you've seen?
Well, I think in a way you actually just captured it because you said it's a recipe, and a recipe has, it has ingredients, it has a chef, it has steps, and I think you need to have that. So I would say the ones that do it most well don't leave it to chance, right? They
Mm,
don't allow it just to be, oh, it might come up in a conversation. I'm smart, I'll come up with it, I'll think of it on the fly, and you put the structure, a practical, repeatable approach in place that has steps that you follow that just doesn't leave it to chance. So I think
mm,
that's perhaps maybe the most important. I think there's two others, and I'm sure Albert has some, but I think setting a goal and then setting targets is really important. And I think people are more accustomed to setting sales targets for new business than they are targets for existing clients. And if, as we all know, if you don't have something to measure against, you're not as motivated towards achieving that. So having a high level growth goal, like an actual plan of what you want to accomplish, which might be don't lose this client under any circumstances, or get the extra brand that the client has, but set the goal and set some corresponding targets. I think that's really important. And then the third, I think, is a kind of a more cultural one, which is around a culture of what I call like curiosity, accountability, and proactivity. So like
mm,
the best account people I know actually really do care, right? They're massively curious. They get excited about the earnings calls, they wear the product, they visit the store. So they really, they really have that curiosity. And I think that's part of the fun part about working agency side. It is a little bit addictive, and that's because you get exposed to so many different businesses. But the exciting part about that is learning all the different businesses. So I think that's an important culture. I think accountability, if someone doesn't feel that they're accountable for growth, if you've got no one accountable for growth, it probably won't happen. And then again, the proactivity part is like do something about it, have a plan, have an owner, have an action date, and make it happen.
absolutely. Albert, and I have another question for both of you on this, but Albert, first, other thoughts to add to that in terms of, what are the agencies who do this right do differently?
Yeah, those that do this right, are positioned well. I mean, obviously there's the clear, true positioning, but just how they act, as a strategic partner versus a vendor, right, sets you up much more easily for account growth. So, truly, just having a different type of relationship gives you sort of the responsibility, even, and permission to have those kind of conversations that we're talking about. and it allows you to see more of the organization, their extended network of individuals within those companies or other brands, like Vanessa mentioned. And it allows multiple touch points, right? It's sort of a team sport a little bit, right? Having an executive talk to an executive while maybe an account manager is talking to a project manager on the client side. So there have multiple points of contact, and not leaving it kind of just a single point of failure.
Yeah, for sure. The orchestration piece, I think, is really, really important. And I'd be curious, and you might have to just go off the dome on this one, but since you've both been on the inside and the outside of an agency and in growth roles, is there anything, as you are now kind of looking from the outside in, things that you realized about either what you thought when you were operating within an agency that, maybe just the common um, excuses isn't the right word. The common reasons that we give ourselves for, why we're not achieving, certain, client growth, or stories that we told ourselves. Is there anything now that see from the outside looking in of, oh, I never really saw it this way when I was inside the organization, or these reasons I told myself, I now realize, yes, they're challenges, but not reasons for not acting. Either
Yeah.
of you can go.
And well, I can start. I
Yeah,
mean, there's a
sure.
lot. I mean, I think, look, it's very easy when you're being held accountable for numbers, week after week, to feel like, and that's the case, whatever role you're in, because there's a board or there's someone, that market conditions are, they're there and you can't change them.
Mm,
How could I possibly change the like geopolitical economic landscape? I can't do that. And my clients are all suffering from it and nothing's happening. So, so there's no growth possible. I think perhaps maybe taking a kind of a step outside of that and having a more
mm,
objective look is, where does that actually lead to opportunity? Because their business is, I mean, suddenly if your client actually goes bankrupt, I'm going to say, yes, fair game. Like, you probably can't grow very much with them. But that client will still go somewhere else and you'll still get, an active referral if you've done the right thing with them as a client. But, outside of that scenario, when clients are suffering and in pain, assuming their business continues, there's still an opportunity somewhere if you look for it and
mm.
listen for the signals. If they're reducing their team, do they need more external support, etc.
Yeah, that's a great piece of input because I think when we're on the inside and it's our problem in the organization to solve, it's often easy to get caught in the factors that are stacked against us, and to have this sort of feeling that, well, the market is performing this way or all my peers are performing this way, so that it's just not possible. And that is of course a reality that we're dealing with, but continuing to kind of ground ourselves in what is it that we can control, what is it that we can do, what new opportunities are revealing in themselves in this tough situation, I think is a really good mindset. Albert, anything come to mind for you? Just a different view that you have now that you're looking from the outside in.
Yeah, looking from the outside, I've been surprised by how varied the approaches to this really are across
Mm,
different companies. Is it the producer because we're kind of more production focused, and so that they're the relationship person, or we're true more of a traditional model where we have an account lead and structure, right? Or does account growth fall within sort of the new biz sort of function within an organization, or is it truly founder led and they own relationships? And so the true variety of how this
mm.
plays out across different agencies was I guess not shocking, but kind of surprising how varied it can be.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, let's jump into or dig in a little deeper and jump into some more substance just around. We know existing client growth is often a challenge, or it's not easier said than done in some ways. But Vanessa, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about just some of again, we'll get back to the ingredients or sort of frameworks that really help us uncover new opportunities and do that in a consistent, disciplined, kind of predictable fashion.
Yeah, I sort of think about that as a kind of client growth system. And, it's suddenly not going to get away factors outside of your control. But what I think following a sort of repeatable methodology does is it gives you like the best possible chance you could have of being
Mm.
successful. And there's really, I think, let's say probably five core components, I talk about. And the first of those is understanding your customer. And that is at a understanding the business model of your, so we can typically we'll get a brief and look at the brief and you understand that specific thing. But I think that higher level understanding at a business level is really important. So how do
Mm.
they make money? What's the business model? What are the external factors impacting them? What's their current period, performance and forecast, strategic initiatives? So like gathering all of that information so that you can have a really informed conversation with your client, which demonstrates that you're interested and that you care, which, to Albert's point, shows that you're thinking as a partner as opposed to a sort of an executional vendor. And I think that's important. Whatever service, whatever it is that you're providing, that context is really important. And it gives you the ability to know what are the other factors impacting your client that you might not otherwise be aware of, which
Mm.
is, really important. They undergo, is there a big also over here? What are the different things that are happening? So that's the first part, understanding your client. And that goes beyond just understanding the business and the company. It's like really understand your actual client and, what does keep them awake at night? How are they measured? Because that may not be exactly the same, but personal motivation is really important as well. So how's your client being measured? And what are their kind of, personal aspirations? I think that the second is around the relationship mapping part, which is know that stakeholder landscape really well. So when I say understand your client, think beyond just the person that you first interacted with or you think is your primary stakeholder, but who do they report to? Who influences them? Who maybe is driving a decision that isn't in the room with you, but is actually very important to that final decision? So start to do as much digging around as you can to understand that and think about people in terms of advocates, neutral, detractors, as well as who's making the buying decision, influencing, and what kind of buyer are they? Are they a technical buyer? Are they an end user? Are they business? So do that mapping and then map your team against them so that you've got a corresponding stakeholder. So you don't have
Mm.
one core account person trying to manage all of those different relationships. And one day you're talking to a, brand level person, and the next day they've got to elevate and have a CMO level conversation. I try and map the appropriate structure in your organization. So I think like some, really doing that is important. And then do the same thing to their technology and partner ecosystem. Who else do
Mm.
they work with, right? Who are their major technology partners and who are the other partners from an agency perspective that they might be working with? Who's running their SEO program or who's, there's generally some other people in the mix there. And it's not so much about trying to understand that to, win work away from them. It's like just know the complete picture, build relationships. You can often learn a lot about your client that they might not have thought to tell you from talking to one of their other partners. And also, if you find that there is a problem anywhere, maybe there's an opportunity for you to step in and help. But mapping that ecosystem, a really important next step. The fourth piece is that communications cadence, right? Giving yourself the structure that means that you do have a scheduled executive check-in where you get your, whether it's the founder or you've got that executive check-in that's happening, that you've really talked and you've got some time to spend talking about the business and partnership, not just the project. So, decide, you don't have to do the same thing for every single one of your clients, right? Group or segment your clients to say,
Mm.
this group, high value and high potential, I'm going to spend the time with them doing a semi-annual relationship review session. This group over here, we're going to do a smaller kind of check-in on a less frequent basis, but have those structures in place so you don't leave things to chance. And we're going to talk a little bit about tools, but we've got all the tools and capabilities in the world now to prompt us to make sure all of those things happen. And then the last one is really, how do you take all of that? So it's great, I've done all of that, I've mapped all that information, I've got all that sitting somewhere. what does that mean in terms of a growth plan? And I think that's really where the sort of the magic and the insight has to come. And there's not really a formula, but if you know all of that and you know what your agency does and what it's done for other clients, think about your goals. And are you trying to retain the client? Are you trying to sell them different services? Is there a different part of the organization where you want to build a relationship? Do you have a great relationship with the technology team, but not with the brand team? Like, think about that, set some goals, and put together. Doesn't have to be not talking about monstrously long documents, like a short plan that says, this is what I want to accomplish with this client in the next 6 months. Here's the 3 things that we're going to do to try and make that happen. So those are understand your customer, map the relationships, technology and partner ecosystem, communications cadence, and then the actual growth plan itself.
Before we jump over to you, Albert, and then I have a couple follow-up questions on this, but and maybe if we get to this and the people in the process stuff, then we can just kick that can down a little bit. But
Yeah.
are there particular structures that you've seen that sort of best support this? And maybe Albert, actually, we could start with you on that, just because now you're seeing, you mentioned in your previous comment, it's like agencies are tackling the client growth, the client management question or opportunity or challenge in very different configurations, and that makes sense. We do different things, we sell different things, we have different team structures. um, but just at the very top level, do you feel like it's like this kind of approach requires a specific sort of structure, or it's like lots of structures can work with this approach as long as you have as long as you know who's doing what and you're doing it?
Yeah,
So
exactly. And that's, kind of what I was going to add to this topic was that sort of land and expand racy, right? Like who's accountable for identifying the upsell. And in our case, it was a team sport. It was like anybody can identify this, right? Your QA person, your like junior account person, like your strategist, whoever could identify these things. And we wanted them to do that. And we sort of explained our agency across the board to everybody, so it became a team sport. So yeah, so who's accountable, but then who's also responsible for running with it, right? Is it your strategy team? Is it your account lead? Is it the founder, right? And then who needs to be sort of brought in when it's time to actually put any kind of numbers to that? So yeah, it can work with any kind of makeup of team, but you have to have a framework and be clear about who's the one tackling each sort of area. I always use the unclear expectations. Unexpected expectations are planned resentments, right? So you're creating problems if you don't create this kind of structure. For
Sounds
sure.
like that sounds like good relationship advice in general.
Agree.
I'm going to call you after this with a few relationship questions. We're expanding the practice at your consultancy.
There you
Um, a question for you, Vanessa, in terms of the communications cadence, and I like this idea. I think it's important of kind of looking across your portfolio, and you have a different plan or a different level or depth or comprehensive nature to a plan based on the client. Like, you don't have to do the exact same thing or the exact same depth for every client. I think that's really, really important. I remember when, as at our agency, when we got better at that and getting like really efficient with relationships that we just, for various reasons, felt like they are what they are. They're probably not going to grow that much. There's probably not that a lot of opportunity. Let's not spend that extra time there.
Yeah.
But going to the communication cadence, and this is subjective, but I think we sometimes run into these challenges where we're trying to work our way up in the organization, or we have stakeholders within the organization that aren't necessarily asking for for more communication
Yeah.
from us, right? Like, so we can say, hey, we want to bring you more ideas, or we want to be proactively and strategically communicating with you, but the client is just like, I've got 20 other partners. This
Yeah.
isn't the priority, and I'm sure you've seen that. But any advice or thoughts on how you kind of get to the right level of communication given what you think the client can take in?
Yeah. I mean, you are right. It definitely happens, and you feel like you've got so much, great bottled up, ideas and recommendations, and you just can't engage with your client because, for whatever reasons. Um, I so I don't know that there's a single magic answer to that. I kind of wish that there
Yeah.
were. I would suggest that it is, often a sort of like it's by proof point, right? So it's a little bit sort of like slowly but surely that you need to kind of work towards that. And I'm sure most people also have probably been in the corresponding situation where you end up presenting an idea to someone that's like, wait, I must go and get so and so, which is obviously the ideal scenario. That's what you want to try and get to. So I think, and again, it's why I say this isn't like, bottled magic. It's just giving yourself the best chance of success. So if you consistently do this and your ideas are good ideas and they're grounded in the business and you do know what their objectives are, then some level of persistence without being overly aggressive, I think will ultimately get there. But it's also why you use that broader ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
Because it might be hard for you to suddenly get a relationship with the person that you really think you should get in front of, but maybe one of their partners has got a relationship and you can collaborate and do something together. So it's like think outside of the obvious and what's
Yeah.
directly in front of you and try and put it together.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And it reminds me too, this is all a trust building exercise anyway. So you may not, get straight to that relationship where you're having a very dynamic back and forth conversation with the client all the time.
Yeah.
You're winning trust along the way with the projects that you're delivering, with the way that you're interacting with them. You're just kind of
Yeah.
like looking for those little cracks of the door being left open to say, hey, maybe there's an opportunity to just grow the relationship a little bit here.
Yeah, and you might want to do a annual planning session and find tremendous resistance. So like see if you can like
Yeah.
get in a, 45-minute touch point, just do the things that you can. But if you've got the kind of the plan in mind and the framework there, you know what you're aiming towards.
Yeah. One anecdote I just want to share before we move off this topic is on the understanding the business piece, which I think is great advice. I think we all know it to some extent, but I don't see it practiced very well often. Uh, and I remember early in my career and I was at a digital agency and we were working very closely with the advertising agency. It was a big luxury automotive brand. And I was again very early in my career, but I was very struck by how the account leads at the ad agency, they
Yeah.
knew the business. They knew the sales volume, they knew the regions that were performing well, they knew what was going on in the competitive set. They knew stuff like, because it was a German automotive brand, they knew things like how currency fluctuations might impact kind of the forecast of the business. And it stuck with me very, very early that it's like, okay, there's more than just digesting what our client presents to us in the strategy deck. There
Yeah.
has to be, I think, at the account and the key leadership within the agency, there has to be a genuine interest in understanding the business. Like, and I felt like some of these really good account leads would be contributors in a
Yeah.
business executive meeting for that brand. Um, and the other piece, especially for us who run, many of us who run smaller agencies, and there may not even be a dedicated account team. Um, I think if you can exhibit that behavior at the executive level, and show team members. And again, I remember in our agency that the more interested the leadership teams seemed in the business and like really understanding the business, the more that trickled down to the design teams, the engineering teams, the creative teams, and the project management teams, and going, oh, well, okay, like we need to be genuinely curious in this, not
Yeah.
just understanding the dynamics of a given project.
Yeah. That's why I talked earlier about like the culture of curiosity and like what makes agencies fun. Because we're all like they're hard work as well. But like
Yeah.
I that ability to like deep dive and then you learn about like I mean, I'm sure you've both like we've all learned about bizarre businesses in our time. I know more about like, funeral homes and cremation than I would have expected to, or
Yeah.
medical devices, but they're all kind of fascinating. Um, when you sort of dig in, as it were, to them.
You're like, how do we calculate the lifetime value of a funeral home customer? It's a tricky
Oh,
question.
it's kind of
No,
anyway. Yeah. Oh,
yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Off
But
track.
the last piece of advice on that, just for the group, and I'm sure many of you do this, but I think it is helpful just in that aspect of understanding the business, even internal team show and tells. having teams get together for 20 or 30 minutes and just talk about the business, not the work you're doing for them, any of that. Having share outs of, hey, there's this big dynamic that's going on right now and it's really affecting this aspect of the healthcare sector. I think it's interesting to keep an eye on, and just keeping the team as engaged as possible. Because then you see it creep up in a creative leader who's presenting a comp, and they
Yeah.
might make a reference on their own to a factor within the business. So I really do think, especially at these smaller agencies, that understanding of the business and that curiosity of the business of our clients really has to start with the leadership
Yeah.
team within the agency and trickle that down into all the
Yeah.
practitioners.
Yeah, and kind of engaging in it because, most of I mean, it's not going to be applicable in every possible industry, but most of the clients you can walk in their store, you can pick up the product, you can sit in a dealership, right? There's a lot of ways of experiencing the brand. And even though we might be, in a digital or a technology context, feel that that's less relevant because we don't do in store or but it really is because at the end of the day, those companies spend a lot of time and money on building their brands and every aspect of it. And the experience needs, anyway, it's a great way of, I think, if you don't do that, clients, I think, sometimes really notice it as well.
Absolutely. And I would just leave with this, which is, we're all busy and, we're getting paid to do what we do. But I think the difference between good and great in that regard, it's the Kobe Bryant scenario of he goes all the practices everyone else does or did, but he still stays to shoot 500 free throws after practice or,
Right.
shoots 500, free throws the morning of. And I think you have to get to like a little bit of that sensibility to really, to get to that level of competency. Well, let's move on. So this is, we've got a framework that you can work on, and having a framework, a roadmap, a recipe is a great place to start. But then there's, of course, all kinds of barriers to doing that well. That could be resource barriers, it could be people barriers, cultural barriers. So we'll kick it over to you, Albert, a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about just some of the internal barriers that are common, even if you have, a
Hmm.
very structured kind of like client growth roadmap and plan. What are some of the common internal barriers, and how do you cite them? How do you overcome them?
Yeah, I think it comes down to like many things, people, process, tools, and positioning. On the sort of people side, right? I preach this over and over, splitting that account and project management role so that you have a clear delineation and role. We did that at Union because ultimately we found, those folks were spending 95% of their time just trying to do the work in front of them, right? And
Mm,
so their barrier was a true one. It was simply I don't have the time to focus on account growth, or this is not a great time because of what's going on in the current work in production, right? Like I can't,
yeah.
hey, we've got all these tickets outstanding, or we've got this delay or this deadline coming up. This is not the right time to talk about it. So the distinction between relationship and the delivery truly becomes a barrier for many different reasons there. Um, and then you've got the data, right? If you don't have your sort of act together sort of operationally, if you don't have your information from your CRM, time tracking, finance, and any of those insights to provide to folks that are focused on the accounts in a timely fashion, it's really, really difficult to have a handle on the situation and know when the timing is right. Hey, we're doing really great here. We've hit our deliverables on time or better at this time. Now is the time to have this conversation. So if you don't have the data in a timely fashion, that's going to be a struggle for you. And then sort of as it comes to the positioning, we found out we were sort of giving strategy away for free. And that
Mm,
goes back to like seeing as a vendor versus an expert and a partner. And when we rolled out our true strategy department and we started splitting, this is mainly for web work, but splitting sort of the discovery and strategy, followed by the big build. We split that into two phases. We were sort of giving the first away a little bit, and that was hurting us. It not only, and we were probably losing money and not very profitable on the build because we underestimated, but we were seen more as a vendor. So just how you go about doing your work sometimes is a barrier to even being able to have a growth conversation because you're just seen as one thing when you really want to be the other.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, is it fair to say, Albert, that I mean, going back to, you have to actually have a plan or a framework in place for how you want to do this to begin with. And if you don't, then there's little chance of this happening organically. But assuming you have that, again, it's not so much that you have to have a specific structure in place, but you have to have a way of understanding who's responsible for what. And I guess you've maybe seen this. I know I've seen it a lot where there's too much ambiguity. And again, it doesn't matter if you have account managers or project managers or you do it differently. It's ambiguity at the who's responsible for what task, or no level. Um, and
Yeah,
or what you said, there's not an honest assessment of going, okay, our account manager is responsible for X, Y, and Z growth, but they're also 100% billable
right.
or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's like, how does that really?
Right. Or the framework is set up to measure things in a certain way, but you don't have the underlying tools or processes to provide that information
Yeah,
sort of in a timely manner. And so they can't achieve the goals that have been set, even if we do know who's responsible at the end of the day. Yeah.
yeah. Vanessa, thoughts to add to this on just the interior, or the internal barriers to sort of operating discipline around client.
Um, I think I talked a little bit about accountability at the beginning, and I think, so Albert, has talked about the data, and you have to be able to have the data to be able to give people the information, measure against the targets. I do think that from a kind of organization perspective, like clarity around accountability is really important as well. And I think that can be a barrier. So if nobody really owns the numbers, essentially, I've had a long period at WPP, it's all about owning the numbers. So, you've got to make sure that people do know that. And I think there's some discomfort with that if it's not something that's kind of culturally sort of understood and accepted. Um, yeah, because it's uncomfortable sometimes because you don't always
Hmm.
make them. So you have to obviously make sure that people understand accountability, but also it has to be a culture where there's not a sense of, punishment if you don't. Like, there's
Hmm.
lots of factors. So it's a kind of a fine line of making sure that there's somebody who's kind of accountable, owning the numbers, but also, feeling able to, be supported in the goals that they're trying to accomplish as well. That's
Yeah, yeah. For sure. So we'll keep this kind of thread going, and I'll probably loop back on some of the people and operations things as well. But let's talk about it from just the systems and data perspective too, because there is a notion of just trying to define what's possible or define what the objective is, but needing the insight to know if you can achieve it, are you achieving it? Are you on track to achieving it? And Albert, I know you focused a lot on this, and
Mhm.
both within the agencies you're running, but now in your consulting practice. Talk to us a little bit about just the systems data side where agencies get it wrong. Either they don't invest anything in that, or they go overboard and create systems and structures that just are too hard to manage for an agency of a particular size.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Vanessa said this is hard, right? But here's one area where it's never been easier, right, to do things with the data that you have. So the world we're living in now, there's sort of no excuse to not be gaining insights with, especially with AI, right? You can use your historical data, you can use your CRM data, you can look at communication cadence, you can look at your financial, like, are people not paying their invoices on time, and you can feed that data and sort of predict churn, right? There's the ability to do that. So there's automatic workflows like, hey, when we hit a certain percentage of our time on a project, there's a flag that's thrown automatically to the AM and PM, and they can trigger a conversation with a client. And again, this is a little bit more about retention, but it's also about relationships. So things that can be automated right now, either from your existing, PSA or something that you add on top of it. And you talked about it, like understanding the client, like now with sort of, you can build your own little account intelligence model, right? Where you're pulling in relevant papers, relevant news, changes of executives at these large companies or competitors, seeing, their financial reporting, which happens for public companies, quite frequently. So you can automate a lot of that to just sort of feed directly into either the account lead, but also like you said, Tom, to the rest of the team. What's maybe a parsed down version of that for the rest of the team, jargon that's used in that client's industry. And then you can look at communications right now. Every meeting is transcribed and recorded, and all of that stuff can be scanned, right? There's clear signals that you can gain from that information in terms of, hey, this is a risk or this is an opportunity, and that can feed directly into the scoring that Vanessa was alluding to in the framework. So there's a great ability right now to use data to feed into those frameworks. And so I encourage people to just get started with it. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Just try some things and see what you can get out of it. And to your point, Tom, it doesn't have to be all of it, right?
Yeah.
I would say measure what matters. And so if you're not getting any help out of whatever you're measuring, drop it and move on to something different. And then the other thing is your scoping. Like again, to keep clients happy and to find a scope that makes sense, you can use your historical project data, and look at that and determine how you should do it moving forward, based on sort of past performance, so you can keep your clients happy and protect your margins.
Yeah. But I find it so interesting on the system side because I think that there's people are on a lot of people are in two camps. They're either like completely under engineered in terms of tools and data and process around this, or they're over engineered for how the agency like truly operates. And on that side of the spectrum, there's this sensibility that if we have these capabilities in place, they will be valuable to us. And then, of course, as we know, there's all kinds of like people and process and kind of internal systemic issues that often mean we don't get what we thought we were going to get out of a piece of software or approach. And I've appreciated agencies in recent years who've told me things like, "Hey, we went with the PSA," and that could be right, for them. But it's like we went back to spreadsheets a year or two later because we felt like fundamentally we were measuring the business at the level that we felt like kind of capable of doing, and we were getting the best information we could. Is there better information? Of course, but we may not need that. So I encourage people that this is in one of those areas where like I'm not sure that there is a best practice that is a silver bullet for any of you. There's sort of cultural behaviors of how you operate and run the business, and there's sort of a level of understanding of how the business is running that you need to feel like you can do it successfully. And it's easy to get caught up in going like, oh, I want all of this data,
Yeah,
but it's important to know, are you gonna really use it? Because the reality is the levers within our business are fairly simple. They really are in terms of the costs we look at, the revenue that we have, the things that we really need to have a handle on to sort of understand how the business is performing are not that complex. And we can waste a lot of time and energy making them more complex than they need to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
The
and
only
I would just really add like the cadence too, Tom, right? Like there's some things that you want to measure weekly. Like it really is important to look at those things.
Yeah.
If you're running like an EOS framework in your scorecards, but there are other things that are maybe a little bit more macro. So you're looking at them monthly or quarterly. And so choosing the right time to view certain data is also critical. So you're not overwhelmed by a bunch of numbers. And when it comes to this, yeah, there are only a handful that really are predictive and helpful when you're trying to
Yeah.
do things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that applies to, like, we talked a bit about the segmentation part, and I would suggest you keep it as simple as possible because I've suddenly run into some really
Mm.
complex client segmentations where there's been some, algorithmic way to try and assess potential. And I mean, I suppose possibly, but I think at the end of the day, like understanding just on a few simple axes of, current value, 10-year relationship health, and some kind of probably qualitative assessment of potential will be good enough to give you what you need to guide how you deal with that particular client.
Yeah, that's great advice. And actually will dovetails into a question from Nick. So I think some of this will be relevant to Nick, and you can build on it. But Nick, and this is Funkhouse, but he's talking about, they've been largely a project-based shop. And and if depending on the kinds of projects you're doing, there isn't even necessarily the potential for kind of like an account level relationship at that point. But he painting the scenario where in the last couple of years they've started to get a couple bigger engagements that really are more legitimately account worthy. And there is this question of, where do you start in terms of trying to build with that particular client, knowing, and it comes back to what we talked about communications a little bit earlier of just there's meeting fatigue already. There may not be a huge appetite from a client for you to go, hey, like let's meet quarterly, or whatever the case is. But how do you, maybe just some tips as as you move from a project, more of a project based kind of like mentality within your company to something that at least is starting to target longer term client relationships and to grow those?
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that you have to be mindful of sort of scaling it to the type of work that you do, your business, and the type of client. I kind of always go back to have a conversation with your client, right?
Mhm.
About we go to the obvious answer is like talk to them and say, it's important for us to make sure that this relationship is going well. To make sure that happens, we'd quite like to make sure there's some kind of regular checkpoint where we get a chance to share perspectives. Would that be all right? It can be 15
Yeah.
minutes every, and just, and then say, and also we really love learning about your business. We'd love to be able to support you better in your business. Would it be okay if we did an annual planning session for an hour? So I would structure it so you know what your objectives are. So I would focus it on the objective more than like a formula of structure and go, right, I want to make sure that we understand the business, that the relationship is in good health, and we have some forum for expanding our relationship. And then work with them to set up something that, because nobody wants a whole bunch more meetings, right? We all know that
Right.
that's not the case, and everyone's going from like, task switching all the time. It's terribly difficult. But I think most clients will appreciate that their business is valued. They'll most likely like that, and that you want to do the best by them as you possibly can, and that you'd like to help them achieve their goals. Just start simple like that.
Yeah, I like that a lot of, I think there's an important part of making this as genuine as possible, because
Yes.
sort of the last thing, clients are savvy too. So the last thing they want is someone who's like, oh, they want to schedule a monthly call with me so they can sell me more.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
think if it, you know what I mean? And I think if it comes across as that, then, you're not gonna really get in there. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
have that conversation and, come at it from a framework of, we really, we love this business. We love working with you. We want to be as helpful as we can. I like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Like that a
I,
lot.
I
Yeah,
would
we
add,
remember
I
like
would
it's
add
only
I would say I would add practically like for projects. I talked about sort of that discovery strategy. Like you can go deeper with a client there, and it's under sort of the guise of like understanding the broader picture. Like, okay,
yeah,
if where's this going to live? Like, if it's an actual event, like, okay, tell me about this event. What's the larger strategy? What's the brand? Like, getting to know the greater picture at the beginning can sort of set you up for conversations along the way, like you're talking about. And then built into your process would be some sort of retrospective or look back or whatever you want to call it. And that sort of can be a Trojan horse. It can kind of be that moment of like, okay, we're wrapping this. Along the way, we heard X, Y, and Z. Are we ready to move on to those things? Right. So you can bake it into your current process such that it's not, yeah, just an extra meeting that feels awkward.
yeah.
But you sort
Mhm.
of have to adjust your process to allow for those things to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Right, we're bumping up against about 5 more minutes, so I want to cover two things. I want to get to some actions, some advice and actions. Uh, but Vanessa, let's back up a little bit too, and just to ground this in sort of the higher purpose here. It's like we obviously want to do this so that we have a successful business today. But there's also sort of building long-term value for our agencies, and talk to us a little bit about why doing this really well makes us more valuable.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think there's, really, I guess, three things. Anyone looking at your business with an eye to investing or acquiring, will want to see that you've demonstrated the ability to grow your existing clients, full stop, right? That's really important. They're also going to want to feel confident in your forecasts and to know that they are predictable and can be relied upon. So the better you are at trying to figure out how much potential your existing clients have and that you've realized it, the more predictable your forecast appears, and there's value in that. Um, and the last thing, and I think it's kind of hard often for potential acquirers to do, is to really understand the future value. People aren't really buying an agency on the basis of its previous value, they're buying it on the basis of its future value. So anything that you can do to help quantify that is going to increase your valuation and your attractiveness.
Yeah. Yeah, and as we said, we've said this in the soda community before, but there's an element to this in any aspect of running your agency that is take the mentality of you're selling your agency tomorrow.
Right.
What would be all of the things that you're trying to do to make this a valuable asset? And again, to Vanessa's point, an asset that the acquirer has some confidence in. They know the business, they know how to run it, they have visibility into how it's performing, they have visibility into how to grow that. Even if you have zero plans on selling your business, those are practices we need to be working towards just for, the ongoing health of it.
Yeah.
As we wrap down for the last couple minutes here, can you leave us with a few just action items, takeaways? There's lots of places to start with this, and we have, I think, callers from really different scenarios and backgrounds and areas of focus within their business. But what are some things we can take away from the conversation today?
I have a couple. I think Albert does too. Mine, not surprisingly, based on what I've talked about, is have some structure for understanding and communicating with your clients, and set goals and targets, because without those, you're a bit rudderless. So those are my two simple ones. Albert.
Yeah, have a system of record for those two things, right? Having, whether it be a simple Google Doc or something in your PSA for whatever it may be, having a central area where all this information is stored about clients is really, really helpful for the entire team, not just the account team. And ideally making that a bit dynamic and helpful for the future. And then I'd say the other one would be consider an incentive plan. That's something that worked well for us, like incentivizing the right behavior. For us, it was both existing revenue as well as net revenue growth for our what we defined as sort of our key accounts, those that we knew that could grow. So consider, yeah, incentive plans for the folks that directly impact this.
Perfect. Any other comments or questions before we close today? We appreciate the conversation. Albert or Vanessa, any other last thoughts to share as we set people to sail in growing their accounts 30% next year?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would just underscore the curiosity part, right? And it is
Yeah.
supposed to be fun. Try and, it's supposed,
Yeah.
yeah, enjoy learning about your client's business and just have genuine conversations with them and help them.
Yeah. And I think
Uh,
on the goals front, I would add it's like start with goals and be okay with missing them. I don't if any of you are like me, I hate to miss goals, but sometimes that prevents me from putting certain structures in place just individually because I just don't like how it feels when I don't hit an objective. But I think if you're really like starting this practice up, you don't even really know what the goal should be.
Yeah.
Like truly, but it is better to like start with something, and then you may find that you really underestimated what was possible in that area, or you just like wildly overestimated it. It's not about getting it right.
Yeah.
Initially, it's just about getting smarter against the structure and understanding what's possible within it.
Yeah, my final thought would just be remember this business always has been and probably always will be about relationships, right? There's a reason the top five ways to gain revenue are, client referrals, partner referrals, or something to do with your existing clients. So it's all about the relationship, and part of that is all the things we talked about here. But at the end of the day, make sure you have that with your clients.
And remember, it is still a great business for all the problems it has. Albert tried to get out and he can't. He wants to be a recovering agency leader, but he just can't help himself.
I'm trying to make
So,
everybody else's journey smoother than mine.
well, amazing. Thank you both. We really appreciate you sharing your insights and spending time with us today. And thank you for everyone on the call. We appreciate your time. We'll follow up. We'll have a recording of this, so we'll send you the link to that. And I think most of you know how to either track me down or someone within Soda. So if you have follow up questions or want to dig into this a little bit further, please don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you all, and have a great afternoon or evening or morning wherever you're calling in from. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Al.
All right,
Take
thanks
care.
everyone.